Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, this is David Stearns from Haley Marketing Group, and welcome to today's Lunch with Haley webinar. On today's call, we have Brad Smith, Matt Faso, and Steve Lingle, and the four of us were all very privileged to be at this year's Staffing Industry Executive Forum out in Las Vegas just a couple of weeks ago. I have to tell you, this was probably one of the best executive forums that I've been to in terms of really outstanding content, and I think I wish we had 2 or 3 hours to tell everybody more about what we heard. But we're going to do our best in the next 59 minutes to cover a lot of the sessions that we went through. So let's take a look at what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about some of the highlights of the conference in terms of what we saw at the various keynotes, at the breakout sessions, and just in talking to other people and getting the flavor of what we learned from being part of this year's executive forum. So I'm going to kick things off, and we're going to jump right in by talking about the opening keynote presentation by Barry Yason, the president of Staffing Industry Analysts. Barry always has great data on what's going on in the industry. And I want to just cover the information that Barry shared about some of the what he called the staffing community in the future of the staffing industry. So we're going to kind of walk through the critical trends that are happening, and they're in the following areas. First critical trend that Barry talked about was the revolutionary change that's been going on in information technology, and we're all seeing it every day. Social media, switching all of our computer systems to working in the cloud, and something that some of you may be very familiar with, others may not, call it something called big data, which is the fact that there's just becoming such enormous volumes of data about consumers, businesses available online, and organizations are trying to figure out what to do and how to use it. But there's also some other interesting things going on in technology that are going to affect the industry. The cost of technology keeps dropping, so now you don't want to buy software that costs much more than you can get on the App Store from iTunes. We're seeing a freemium model where people are introducing free software. We're also seeing this rapid growth of connection points thanks to smartphones largely, iPads and tablets. Now people are more interconnected than ever, online more often than ever, and what's the impact on the staffing industry? What Barry presented is we now are putting more information in the hands of more people. There's a radical sea change going on in human, behavioral, and economic patterns. And it's going to have a big impact on staffing relationships. We're already seeing it in how we interact with our candidates, that they want to be interconnected with us more, that they're going to deal with us in social media, that Facebook may become the new platform for recruiting, and LinkedIn certainly has already become a key platform for recruiting. But the industry impact is we're going to end up having a lot more data to manage. We're going to have new skills that are going to be needed for recruiters and salespeople in order to find talent and interact with clients. And probably the biggest is we're going to see more and more new business strategies pop up as creative staffing company owners find ways to leverage this technology to create new business models. And 2 examples Barry presented are Elance and Odesk. You may be familiar with them. They are hybrid staffing models and self-service staffing models that are essentially web-based platforms for finding talent. And they're also growing really rapidly as they're proving there are different ways to go about temporary staffing than what the industry's done for 50 years. So beyond the change in IT, Barry talked about a secular shift in staffing usage. And this is really exciting because he said buyers are now more positively biased towards contingent work. And for the first time in years, the buyers are saying, we plan to use more contract staffing, more temporary help as a permanent part of our workforce. The industry growth the past 3 years has been above a historic regression line, so we're seeing faster than expected growth. Now, when he talked about the secular change in usage, the SIA presented several concerns of big staffing buyers. Number one, the uncertainty in the economy. Two, big public deficits. Three, overregulation. Four, unstable capital markets. And lastly, the availability of key skills. What Barry ties that all together is that companies are planning more hires, more temps, more outsourcing, and actually less independent contractors. So we're seeing great demand for how staffing will be used, and it's up to all of our companies to figure out how to capitalize on this so it doesn't just get pushed down to the lowest price bidder. The next critical trend was the rise of total talent management, as organizations are trying to find ways to better manage not just temp help, not just direct hire, but manage talent more strategically. CEOs are seeing talent management as a top priority. The VMS and MSP adoption level is leveling out with large buyers. But RPOs and human resource outsourcing, HRO, are growing rapidly as companies are saying we need to find more intelligent techniques for managing people, from finding temps, onboarding, management of employees, succession planning, retention. You're looking at the total life cycle of talent, and as companies are saying we need help from outside vendors to manage this better. We're going to see in the staffing industry more integration of different types of employees in order to get work done, full-time and part-time, contingent, outsourced, and independent contractors. And as staffing firms, we're going to have to be even more valuable to our clients by helping them understand different techniques for strategic workforce management. The next major staffing trend is the globalization of the industry, and this doesn't affect most of the people who are going to be on today's call, so I'm only spend a moment on it, but the large employers in the U.S. and abroad, they want global staffing vendors. They're not going to be your target market. They want companies, the big staffing companies, to continue to acquire other staffing vendors so they can service their needs anywhere in the world. What was interesting to see is where some of the highest potential for staffing growth is. The U.S., Canada, Australia, Poland, China, and the Netherlands led the world. And Matt, I think you had another note you wanted to point out from this particular part of the presentation.
Yeah, Barry talked about how the staffing industry, the employment industry in particular, is becoming increasingly complex in the legal environment. And the thing that he mentioned that we are always kind of talking to our clients about is that the more complex that environment becomes, the more employers need to lean on staffing experts, like everybody on this call, to help them navigate that environment. It's so hard, especially for small businesses, to stay up with all the changes that are happening in the industry.
Yeah, and that brings us to the next point that Barry was making about the increase in the complex legal environments. We're going to talk more about healthcare in a minute, but that's the 800-pound gorilla for the industry right now. But the reality is I just saw a presentation. I'm currently broadcasting to you from Hilton Head, South Carolina at the Answer Team conference, and happened to see a speaker from ASA talking about all of the different regulatory changes going on nationally at the federal level and in quite a number of different states. It's astonishing. The speaker yesterday left the room, and luckily it was happy hour right afterwards because everybody was just kind of stunned in their chairs looking at all the issues staffing companies and employers have to deal with. And to Matt's point, if you're not already on top of these legal issues, you need to get on top of them for your own business. And then you need to help your clients get on top of them so that they can better manage their workforce issues. And speaking of workforce issues, the last point that Barry made about staffing in the future was that there's a huge mismatch going on right now. You see the unemployment numbers, and it still looks like things are pretty bad. But the reality is there are lots of skills where you're feeling it right now. It's hard to find talent. And across the United States, there's this giant workforce mismatch between the skills that are needed and in high demand and the skills that are actually available on the street. And as staffing companies, obviously we have the role of finding the people with the skills that are needed, but we also may find an opportunity in helping people with the wrong skills to find training opportunities so that we can help employers better match the talent that's out there to the demand in the workforce. And Brad, to just flip the slide, we're going to talk about the opportunities and threats and near-term outlook just to kind of finish up Barry's presentation. In terms of opportunities and threats, the biggest opportunity right now is take advantage of those secular wave changes. And the industry's going up, leverage it. Figure out how you can use that wave to grow faster than the competition. We're going to talk more about how to do that in a little bit. Embrace technology. We're not, as an industry, we typically are not that great at adapting new technology before other places, but there's such an opportunity to engage employers and job seekers in all kinds of new ways by embracing technology. Learn talent management and outsourcing. Even small companies can get better at managing staffing more strategically and capturing the independent workforce that the federal government is trying to squash out of existence by going and auditing more and more companies to find out whether or not they're in compliance with independent contractors. Staffing companies should just be there to say, let us take care of that so you don't have the independent contractor risk. Expand the categories that you can outsource services for clients, so you're not just providing people, but you're providing solutions. And as I was just mentioning, find ways to help solve those skill shortages. Those are some of the best opportunities for you right now. The threats, now that the industry is doing better, we've got more entrants coming in, so competition's getting tougher, and prices are being driven down by both some of the large suppliers of staffing and the larger buyers of staffing are getting very sophisticated about their purchasing. The regulatory changes represent a huge threat. We'll talk about the potential penalties in healthcare reform. That's number one on the list. You've got to keep your eyes open for disruptive models, things like that Odesk and Elance. Who's going to come in and try to steal your lunch? And our job is to be on top of that and find ways to add new values, add better value for our clients before somebody comes in with a new business model. Also, another threat is the quality of service. There's a real and a perceived problem with the quality of temporary help, and we need to do a better job as an industry at demonstrating that temp help represents excellent workers, not marginal workers. And we need to do an even better job at providing the right people at the right time so that our customers and employers in general see the real value of staffing. And the last big threat is the global economy, and we keep seeing about things in Greece, Spain. We had the nuclear disaster in Japan. We don't know what's going to happen next. Is it going to be Israel attacking Iran? We don't know. And depending on what happens, there could be dramatic shakes in the global economy, which a lot of people think could throw us back into another recession. So while we're trying to capitalize on opportunities, we also have to be ready and have plans to batten down the hatches. Near-term outlook, good news. Staffing industry analysts had to revise their forecast upward from where they originally set them. And they said the industry is actually growing faster at about a 9% rate versus what they had originally forecast. Only a point higher, but still we'll take anything higher is better. Bear with me 1 second. The search segment of the industry is actually growing the fastest with 12% growth forecasted for this year. And then if you look at specific sectors, kind of quickly run through them, office is supposed to be up 6 this year, industrial up 8%, IT up 14, healthcare up 8, finance up 8, engineering up 8, legal up 7, clinical staffing up 8, and marketing positions this year up 7. Everything's up, and the only thing that was a bit of a sour note that Barry ended on was they're lowering their forecast for 2013 because growth is happening so fast in 2012. So overall, lots of good stuff and lots to be aware of to help plan for the future. As I said, it was really hard to take Barry's. He had so much data, hard to condense it into the first 10 minutes of this. But now let's move on and try to talk about some of the other presentations that we attended. I'm going to go right into the next keynote, and then I'm going to turn it over to some of the other guys. Very entertaining presentation by Chester Elton, author of the book, The Orange Revolution. And what I liked about Chester's presentation is his message that a small group of people can change the world. And he talked about how to build world-class teams inside your organization. And really, it's about something that the staffing industry has always talked about, creating employee engagement. Companies with engaged employees show 19% more operating income than average companies. Companies with disengaged workforces show 30% less operating income. So when you're out there selling staffing, think about it. If I can provide you engaged workers who are going to really bust their butt to do a good job, that has a huge impact on the bottom line versus the other staffing company that's sending you a body that's going to result in lower performance. The top drivers of engagement are simple. Show people appreciation. through having lots of opportunity for them to be recognized, and show that you care about them from a business and a personal perspective. And again, this is Management 101, but employee surveys have shown time and time again, employers aren't doing this. Then regular communication with people to demonstrate that you're setting clear expectations, people know what you want, and that you're giving people feedback that's direct and timely so that they build trust in the organization and its ability to communicate. And the last one that was a little bit surprising to me is not the goal setting. I knew that was important, but accountability. That actually holding people accountable is a motivator. It drives performance. It makes people not just hit the goals, but want to hit the goals, want to work harder. And I think that's because it drives out the people who don't want to be held accountable. And the last kind of take home from this keynote was, for me, was the general praise has no impact on people. If you want to have impact in your feedback, it's got to be very timely and very specific. And that the behavior you reward will be repeated. So you want to be very specific in your feedback about the behaviors that you like if you want to see those behaviors repeated. All right, Steve, you and I went together to the follow-up session with Chester where he talked about how to put a roadmap into place. If you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about what we learned at that one.
Sure. Thank you, David. Yeah, in Chester's follow-up session, he really he broke it down into kind of tangible ways that you can actually apply these tactics in your organization. And as staffing companies, too, it's nice because they obviously not only work for staffing companies, but they work for all businesses. So this gives you a tool to present to your clients that's something they could implement in their business as well. The way he broke it down, he said, first you need to establish what's your noble cause, which is basically what are you doing, what's your great cause that you're providing to your clients or your candidates. Here at Haley Marketing, we say we make great marketing more affordable. We educate the staffing industry on how to market better. And with that noble cause, you want to try and break it down really into its simplest terms and what are you trying to do. Some of the examples in the session, there was people there who were in healthcare staffing, and they said they help heal people. They make people better because they're providing doctors and physicians and things of that nature to help make people well. So it could be something as simple as that when you break it down. Once you have your great cause or your noble cause established, then it's a matter, he breaks it down into the rule of three. Number one is to wow people. Number two, no surprises. And thirdly is to cheer, which David talked about before, is to motivate your employees. The wow rule, commit to being world-class. You need to dream, you need to believe, you need to take risks. You want to wow your employees and wow your clients and your candidates. And world-class, you don't need to do big, giant, kind of enormous, necessarily world-changing things, but it's doing a lot of the little things right. What can you do for your clients and candidates that no one else does? And to implement these, you just need to sit down with the people in your organization and say, how do we wow people? What are some opportunities to wow people? It's simple things. If you have, for example, a candidate that just maybe welcomed a new child into the world, sending a simple care basket out to their family, those things make a difference. And the point that Chester drove home time and time again was, with any of these things, you need to commit to make the change. At first, it's going to be uncomfortable, but once you commit to make the change and you implement it, it becomes really part of what you're doing every day. So it's not a matter of trying to make time for these things, and I don't have enough time to do them. It becomes part of what you're doing every day. The second step, he said, was no surprises, which basically breaks down to clear, detailed communication, brief before, debrief afterwards. Analyze your details to identify issues and correct those issues. Don't wait for an unhappy client. Address the issue first. Be proactive and anticipate things that might come up down the line. And then creating incentives and rewards for being proactive for your employees who are recognizing things that need to be fixed or ways that processes can be improved. And lastly, defining the results you want because you're not going to know how you're successful unless you have definitions of what you're trying to achieve and ways to measure that. The last piece he touched on was cheer, praising effort, rewarding results, and giving specific praise. Don't just tell people they did a good job today. Tell them specifically what they did well today. And also, in that same light, tell them what they can improve upon. Giving positive, immediate feedback is important as well. Be specific and timely, and get your whole team involved. It all goes back to employee engagement and how are you engaging your team and really getting them to buy into this. A lot of this at first glance seems like maybe pie in the sky stuff, but when you really apply it and break it down, it's very simple, easy things to do, and it really makes a difference. David touched earlier on the point about the difference between an engaged workforce and a workforce that isn't engaged, and it's really drastic. The numbers are there to prove it, and you need to take these steps to implement these action plans. And now I'll throw it over to Matt Faso, who's going to give us some tips on implementing LinkedIn in your recruiting process.
Thanks, Steve. I had a chance the first day of the conference to attend some roundtables that were presented by some industry experts and also attended by some staffing owners, so there was a lot of good exchange of ideas. The first one I attended was 10 tips for getting the most out of LinkedIn. There's nothing too groundbreaking here, but a lot of it bears mentioning. When you're using LinkedIn, you want to make sure that your profile is 100% complete. That's kind of a bare minimum. You want to make sure that you've got a complete summary. Make sure that summary says what you do, how you can help people, and something personal about yourself. And always remember to connect your LinkedIn profile to your company website, your blog if you have one, and any of your social media outlets. This is something we preach at Haley Marketing. Make sure to update your status frequently, because without staying active on social networks, you kind of disappear from them. Something that the expert from LinkedIn mentioned was that in March, 20% of the traffic to LinkedIn was via mobile, and that was up 15% from January. Just what that means is you want to make sure that when you send somebody an email through LinkedIn and InMail, just keep it short, because the number of people who are accessing it through their mobile devices is rising very rapidly. And something that she recommended that I had actually never heard of was the LinkedIn Outlook Social Connector. What this does is download your Outlook contacts, your LinkedIn contacts into Outlook. What that does is allow you to interact with those people, your contacts through LinkedIn through your standard email program. And then the last thing that she mentioned was to make sure that you use your products and services tab on your company page. And also, a lot of people have personal recommendations, but make sure to get company recommendations on your company LinkedIn page as well. The second roundtable I had the chance to attend was making sense of recruitment SEO and measuring ROI. A few quick takeaways from this one. If you've got an ATS, just make sure to analyze the data from your ATS. Don't do it on intuition alone. You want to track your return on investment from your different posting vendors and job boards, and just make sure to adjust your budget and strategy accordingly based on the data that you get from those sources. And something else that happened at that session, one of the owners of a staffing firm mentioned that they stopped posting to job boards because every time they post to a job board, they're overloaded with applicants, and that's a drain on their resources. And something that this kind of, the light bulb kind of went off in my head, I think that's a real opportunity for a staffing firm. Because if you think about a staffing firm that's overloaded by applicants to a job posting, think about a hiring manager, where hiring is just a very small part of their job. I think as staffing experts, we can take advantage of our expertise and use the tools that we have at our disposal to be able to, go through these applicants quicker and better than your clients are able to. It's just a really good opportunity for staffing firms to show your expertise in this area. The last thing I wanted to mention real quick, I went to a marketing roundtable. There was one good tactical tip from that roundtable I wanted to share here. It was to have a contest on Facebook and have your clients tell the best use of your employees. And what this does, it basically gets your clients posting references to you on your Facebook page, and turns your Facebook page into a large grouping of testimonials.
Great, thanks, Pat. And I'm going to take it back over here and talk about a session I went to that was, I don't know, it was planned to be about the implementation of the Chester Elton principles, but it turned into that. It was a panel discussion with Jay Cohen from Signature Consultants, Dan Campbell from Hire Dynamics, Amar Panchal from Acraya, and Scott Wintrip from Staffing U. And they were talking about how to really measure, manage, motivate, and engage employees and how they do it in their businesses. Let me just share with you the biggest lessons that I learned from their presentation. Number one, you can't be innovative if you're churning people. Our industry turns over 35% of its internal staff a year, and that's an impossible scenario if you want to have an innovative staffing organization. It's also impossible if you want to have a high-service organization. Second thing is, the most important training is to show people why their work makes a difference. So when you're teaching people how to do their job, show them why they're doing their job, because if they can connect the dots and see the bigger picture of how they're putting people to work and how they're bettering society, they'll be much more motivated to do a great job. Jay Cohen specifically talked about putting culture over process. I've always been a big believer in creating a process kind of like McDonald's does to ensure consistency. And Jay said, well, that is important. You don't want to neglect that. Put culture first, because if process triumphs culture, your organization turns into a mess. You're efficient, but you don't deliver quality. Another one of the people talked about when they made the biggest improvements by putting time into developing the frontline managers, not the senior level managers and not the frontline people themselves, but actually training the frontline managers had the biggest return on investment, because they were teaching people who were going to teach the people on the front lines how to do the jobs and knew how to handle the key tasks, and putting extra effort into those frontline managers to make sure they weren't ignored had the biggest payoff in terms of return on investment. And the final point was, when you put that process over culture instead of putting culture first, your business actually is going to suffer, because you end up making dumb decisions, particularly in hiring in your own business, because you ignore the importance of maintaining your own culture. You lose your identity. And in staffing, what you do every day is your brand, and how you do it is your brand. And if you just focus on process but not having the right people, it's going to change how you do it. It's going to change how people perceive your company. Now, in terms of creating a high-performance organization, the biggest challenges these companies ran into, number one of the CEOs said, was adapting a management style to the culture of the organization and putting employees first, because the CEO said that wasn't his natural style, and it took him a while to learn how to do it. But it was essential to achieving the transformation his business had. Another one said he realized he didn't have his priorities right, and he needed to put his internal employees ahead of his customers. That the best way to deliver great value to the customer was inside people first. The next person talked about by focusing on culture, we don't become cynical about our people, and we're more willing to invest in them. And this is a fascinating observation to me. He said, the more we pay attention to the culture of the organization, the more, one, we're not tolerant of people who don't fit, but number two, the more we see the value of our people, and the more we'll spend money to make them even better. Give me one thing. I lost one point there about the challenges. One challenge that a lot of the staffing companies were facing, and I want to step back to, was that one of the people mentioned that they were having a big problem with attracting talent, internal employees, when they're competing with other local employers who were viewed as being more desirable. So how do they solve these problems? Number one, how do you put people at the core of your business? One of the companies actually has a metric to track internal retention, and they reward people for retaining internal staff. They actually have a deferred comp plan with a bonus pool specifically for retaining employees. Every producer in one of these organizations has a personalized dashboard that shows them their key indicators, and managers and employees are informed daily about data that is missing. Metrics are used positively, not to beat people up, but if you meet your goals, we're going to continue to invest in you. And finally, Scott Wintrip showed his model for retention, and there were two simple points. Number one, be rigorous about selection, and you all know this. Hire the right people with the right personalities for the roles you have. Motivation has to align company vision, values, culture. Skills have to align with the available ramp-up time. So if I'm hiring in a crisis, I will allow the skill deficiency more than the personality deficiency. If I've got time, I won't allow for any deficiencies. And the second part of Scott's model was unwavering accountability. You need metrics that drive outcomes that then produce the results that you want. You need to clearly define responsibilities for success in everyone's role, and then you need reciprocal acknowledgement that the employee understands what's expected of them and that you've clearly conveyed how they're going to be measured and managed. All right, let's move on. Matt, talk about the next session on the overlooked buyer.
Thanks, David. This is a really good session. It was called the Often Overlooked Premium Buyer, Small and Mid-Sized Firms. And as most people on this call probably know, the SMB business is so critical because they're less price sensitive than larger companies that are higher volume purchasers of staffing. So they can help you get some of those margins that have been creeping down, back up. But the thing to note here is that they are getting more sophisticated in their buying. One way to reach these buyers, a good way to reach these buyers, is through email and also social media. And they talked about on this panel, provide compelling content. If you're in commercial staffing, you want to be talking about safety issues. You all have access to industry info and trends. All staffing companies have salary info you can share with your small to medium business buyers, those prospects. You want to be visible in your community. That means being active in chambers and groups and trying to get into the newspaper as well. There was something that happened in this panel. There was a staffing owner who said that they have basically 3 check marks when they look at a prospect to see if it's a good prospect. And they check to see if they have to go through procurement or HR. And if they have to go through procurement or HR, they will not pitch to that prospect. And I just thought that was interesting. That doesn't mean that everybody has to do that, but they have evaluated what their best kind of customers are, and they won't deviate from that. He said that what they look for is they like to sell to the executive assistant who's responsible for everything. And the important thing is that you can be the hiring or compliance expert to this segment. As I've already talked about on this call, but it just keeps coming up, small businesses don't have the resources to be experts and keep up with the changes in the industries they don't specialize in. So it's really important for you to be the expert, especially to this market segment. And again, one of the things that is nice about this segment is that it's easier to use your relationship with an SMB as a barrier to exit, as opposed to large buyers where you're just a number on a vendor list. This is where you can really use that relationship model to hold on to clients. And I think up next, David's going to talk about coping with healthcare reform, something that might be of some interest to the people on this call.
Yeah, the healthcare reform was a big issue, and it's really fascinating to me. They had an attorney there, George Reardon, who talked about pay or play penalties and the impact it could potentially have on the staffing industry. And as you may know, the penalty is $2,000 per year times the number of full-time employees you have minus 30. And how exciting that the staffing industry, everybody who works more than 30 hours a week, measured on a month-to-month basis, is considered a full-time employee. And even more fun, they're going to take the total hours your staff has worked, and I forgot the exact calculation, but they're going to calculate an equivalent number of full-time employees for you and say if you're not providing health benefits for that number of people that are affordable, you got to pay $2,000 a head. I went to a presentation yesterday, and I will tell you that another attorney presented on the healthcare reform penalties, and the data that I saw was entirely different than what I saw 2 weeks ago at the executive forum. One thing we know for sure is no one knows for sure. Probably the most interesting thing I heard yesterday was that the speaker yesterday was from the American Staffing Association. He said they don't have a handle on it. Washington doesn't have a handle on it. The large employers don't have a handle on it. The insurance companies don't have a handle on it. And while the Supreme Court debates right now whether or not the mandate to purchase individual health insurance is constitutional, he thought it was very likely they're going to have to push back implementation. But the one big take-home I had from this session is there are a few different solutions being talked about. They're crazy things like franchising your business. So instead of having one big staffing company, you own a bunch of small staffing companies. We're talking about partnering with competitors and literally shifting workers around from company to company so they're not hitting the number of hours at any one employer or job site. Just crazy stuff. But the one thing you need to take home now is don't sit on your hands saying this isn't going to affect me. Now is the time to think about putting together a plan and study what your options are. If you're not already a member of ASA, I strongly suggest joining so that you can get access to their most up-to-date data on what's going on. You want to take a look at the changes in healthcare reform as they're coming up, and more importantly, plan your various options and plan your A, B, and C kinds of scenarios so you'll know what to do come 2013 when you have to start implementing to be ready for 2014. All right, next up, Steve, talk to us a little bit about leveraging social media for recruiting.
Sure, thank you, David. I think you'll notice social media keeps coming up in almost every topic we talk about, with the exception of maybe healthcare reform, but there's probably some way you can even work it in there as well. But this topic was social media for recruiting, how to implement social media tactics to improve your recruiting. The first idea is to create engagement. You do that through providing relevant content to your clients and candidates. On the candidate side, it's more than just, I have a job available for you. It's maybe it's tips on finding jobs, searching for jobs that are right for them, or interview tips, or these sorts of things. And you do that through blogging, posting on LinkedIn, and we'll get a little bit more in depth with some of that later on. But the idea overall is to create engagement through social media. Social media needs to be managed as a task within your recruiting like any other task. Just like sifting through actual paper resumes and sourcing candidates, it needs to be part of what you do every day. It needs to be implemented in a plan, and the recruiters need to be trained on how to use these tools effectively, how to use LinkedIn especially, Facebook. Again, we'll get into some of that more in depth on how to implement these tactics, but the idea is it needs to be what they do every day, part of it. And as managers, we need to don't be so concerned about your recruiters spending time on social media and think that they're wasting time on there. When it becomes part of what they do and you're able to manage that performance and what they're doing in these social media outlets, you're not so concerned then about, are they wasting time on social media? It needs to be looked at as an opportunity. And a way to kind of tie these two in together, social media becomes part of your service experience. Again, part of what you're doing every day. How are you engaging your candidates and your clients through social media? You're able to form relationships with them based on shared interests, and you're able to match the content that you're providing to them because you're able to know what they're interested in and what they're reading, and kind of tailor that content to them and build talent communities within these social services. And real quickly, some tactical tips that were covered in this session, and I'll just buzz through these. Adding video to LinkedIn profiles. We can get a little bit more into that. We have Brad Smith, who is our social media and SEO director here. He can talk more about how to add videos to LinkedIn profiles. You might want to consider separate Facebook accounts for personal and professional use. Plan social outreach at least a couple of times a day, not just posting jobs. Again, it's this push-pull idea of marketing. You're not just pushing jobs in their face, you're providing content that's of value to them. Allow job search on Facebook. Cater to multiple audiences. Consider multiple social profiles or tabs for your different business units. If you have different industries that you specialize in, maybe it's healthcare, maybe IT, consider different tabs within these social profiles for those separate units. Ensure all of your recruiters have a consistent brand on LinkedIn and Facebook. And more importantly, make sure that that brand that they're putting out there is consistent with your company brand as well. And don't be afraid to implement video. And video has become really so inexpensive to produce. It doesn't need to be high-quality video. And actually, one of the presenters who was an expert in social media and video in particular, he said that candidates nowadays, especially the Generation Y, Gen X candidates, they prefer video that's maybe a little bit less produced, not as professional quality. They can relate to that better. And finally, the last technical tip, use blogging. It's a tremendously valuable tool to bring people to your site and deliver thought leadership. And again, providing content that's relevant to your audience and keeping them engaged. And with that, I'll throw it over to Brad Smith, who will talk a little bit more about implementing social media in the staffing industry.
Great, thanks, Steve. SAA
brought in a tremendous speaker, Chris Brogan, who's a New York Times best-selling author and a social media expert, and he consults very large corporations on their social strategy. And he brought some great tips for the staffing industry. First and foremost, he mentioned telling stories on social media. And what he means by that is instead of selling, instead of telling people about your product, use stories. Explain how you've helped a job seeker overcome a career challenge or a company overcome a real staffing challenge. The more compelling you can make a story and less salesy you can make a story, the more effective it's going to be in the social space. The next bullet here, everyone should have a social presence. He used a great analogy, and he said, think about how many phones you have in your office building. You don't have just one single telephone that only one person in the company uses. Social media is the same way. Staffing firms are very reluctant to give everyone in their office the authority to have a voice on social media, and it's like not giving them a telephone. They need a telephone to do their job, and social media is going in that direction. There's going to come a time very soon where social media is going to become a very vital portion of their job function. So the sooner you get people on board with social media, the better. He mentioned embracing complaints. Sometimes complaints can be some of the best comments out there on social media because it allows you to solve a specific problem, and it shows other people who are watching that conversation that you really care. Next bullet is treating followers like family. You want to reach out and as Steve mentioned earlier, if there's a milestone that one of your employees has reached, maybe they've been with your company for so many hours, maybe they just recently had a child, reach out to them through social media. Treat them like they're part of the family, and you'll improve your retention rates. Next up is listen. Use tools like Google Alerts and Social Mention to make sure that you know what's being said about your company, about your recruiters, about your employees, and pay attention to what's being said. And last but not least, don't ignore social media. I had the unique opportunity to sit down with Chris Brogan for about half an hour before his presentation. We were talking about social media and how it's really impacting the internet as a whole. And with Google's recent changes, social media is becoming much more relevant. The more relevant you are in social media and in other online channels, the more opportunity you have to rank well in search results. So social is really affecting how people find your business. If you're not active in social media, people aren't going to find your business, but they're sure going to find your competitors. So it's extremely important. With that said, Matt, why don't you take us through a little bit on procurement?
Thanks, Brad. Brad and I actually had a chance to attend this session. We're going to go through this pretty quick because we're starting to actually run out of time. But this was led by a procurement professional who has been in procurement for, I believe, over 15 years. He had a lot of really good stuff to say. And I know that some of you are going to be interested in this because as much as you try to avoid procurement, at times you're going to have to sell through procurement. Something that he mentioned was that they use procurement uses cost because it's an easy benchmark. But what you can do is help them to understand how to quantify other performance metrics and benchmarks. You have access to a lot of this information, and if anybody wants to know, other performance metrics that you can use to talk to procurement to get them off of just cost, we can discuss that after the call. He also mentioned that procurement is not only interested in cost; it is the most important, but it's not the only thing that's important to them. And he said that they will pay 9 to 15% more for better service. Another thing he mentioned was that the hiring manager probably hates the MSP that they have to go through as well. That's because of the lack of consistency and communication that comes with working through that MSP. Finding a fit and culture for candidates is really hard to do through that process. So you want to make sure that you still have contact with your client. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was he talked about how adoption, compliance, and risk mitigation are also really important to procurement besides just cost. I think, Brad, you had a few things you wanted to mention from that one as well.
Yeah, actually, thanks, Matt. Just one more point. They mentioned that procurement isn't in a silo all by themselves. They're not the only ones that are making these decisions. And he said when looking in the IT space, they will never choose a vendor without talking to the CIO first. So don't feel that your sales and marketing messages are lost on other people outside of procurement, because C-level executives and other influencers can have a big impact on who the procurement specialist actually chooses as the vendor. So David, would you mind walking us through your session on CIO perspectives?
Sure. I think this is the first time that staffing industry analysts had a day dedicated toward technology, and the first roundtable was with a group of CIOs, a fairly large staffing organization. But it was interesting to hear their technology perspectives because I think it's relevant to all of our businesses. And the number one on the list is their top priority is simplification. They need technology to be easier like all of us do, and I'll talk in a moment about how they're doing that. Number two, mobile and social media, and finding ways to use these tools to create differentiation. So if you've been holding off on thinking about mobile because you don't want to make the jump or the investment, or if you're holding off on social, or as somebody just asked us a question, and you're in an organization that blocks social sites, you're already behind what most staffing companies are starting to do, and the big guys are making significant investments. One of the CIOs mentioned that mobile and a strong social marketing strategy are going to become table stakes for competing in the staffing industry. The big guys are, from a technology perspective, are saying, how can we take it a step further to create differentiation? And lastly, the top priority for these guys was to find ways to streamline the candidate intake and order fulfillment processes using technology in new ways. And in terms of some of the, go ahead, Matt.
Sorry, David. One thing I wanted to make sure to mention from this one that I thought would be really relevant to our listeners was they mentioned that make sure that you have your recruiters using your CMS. If you've got your recruiters using your internal systems, when they leave with their Rolodex, they don't take all of your client info with them when they walk out the door. I thought that was a real good takeaway.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. A couple of other things that they talked about there in terms of social media. Find ways to use social to bring staffing services closer to your candidates. So, for example, allowing candidates to search your jobs and apply through Facebook. Looking to include social data in candidate profiles when you do presentations to your clients. Social is not yet replacing job boards for sourcing, but several of the CIOs said the end's in sight for the job boards, and social is going to take it out. And social media is going to radically continue to change how salespeople work and how they connect with prospective clients and current clients. And if you've read the book Social Boom by Jeffrey Gitomer, he'll tell you that social media is the new cold call. In terms of mobile technology, the big guys said we see a future where clients can do self-service hiring just like you book your own airfare today. We see that coming down the pipe. We're looking for ways to provide more information to candidates about specific assignments and allowing candidates to accept assignments via their mobile phone. It's also a way to focus on the service you can provide to candidates and thought leadership, because a lot of the, on the client side, a lot of your clients are reading their email on their mobile device. And if you're going to be doing thought leadership, it needs to be mobile optimized, not just taking people back to your website on a page they can't see on a phone. We also have to think about our business processes and how we're going to change them to make the best use of mobile and social. Next section was on data analytics, and the big guys, if you think about having hundreds or thousands of offices, there's a lot of data to crunch. But even if you're a small one-office staffing firm, just the data you have on your candidates, your fill rates, there's more data to process than you can handle. And the challenge we're having and our customers are having is, what do I do with all this data? There's a real opportunity in finding ways to get, organize, and present data so that it becomes information. And also there's a whole field developing in data cleansing to help people maintain and manage good, accurate information. And lastly, you know, we've heard the cloud, but the big guy said everything we do is migrating to the cloud. Our email, our ATS, our file servers, our backups, we're getting to the point where we don't have any servers in our building. The good news is it makes it cheaper, it makes it easier to maintain. The bad news is it's another layer of complexity that if you don't have an inside CIO, can be even more to manage. All right, Brad, you want to talk about the 20 underappreciated business opportunities?
I'd love to. We're not going to have time to go through all of these, so I'll just point out some of the ones that I found most interesting. First and foremost, gas and oil in North Dakota tied together. Gas and oil is growing hugely, and buyers in the energy sector have reported that they're more inclined to use contingent labor, so they're very favorable. It can be an easy sell. Return of U.S. manufacturing. Chinese labor, it's reported that they've seen 17% growth year over year in wages. So there's no more cheap manufacturing. It's catching up to the U.S., so we've seen a rise in U.S. manufacturing. Number 4 was really interesting to me, interns. A number of states are looking at interns, and they're thinking about new regulations where interns can no longer be free labor. So there's a real opportunity there for staffing firms to build even a business out of bringing interns in and mitigating risk for people that do use interns throughout the year. David mentioned automated staffing, sites like Odesk and Elance. Number 6, the traditional labor market. Companies are realizing that their HR function and recruiting function is a time suck and could be done more efficiently with an outside vendor. There's a real opportunity for staffing firms to take over that entire HR function, especially for smaller to mid-sized businesses. And number 10, warm calls. Social media is often described as a warm call, but looking at tools like social media, looking at email newsletters, they're a great way to get your foot in the door before you even pick up the phone. So instead of just making a cold call, make sure that you've had some form of contact with the prospect, that they have seen your name or seen your company, and you have a much better chance of getting an appointment and closing a deal. Okay, a few more. Local government outsourcing. There was, I thought, a great suggestion to look at the published pay rates for local government. Look at overtime expenses, and from that list, pick out the areas in which there's high overtime rates and high salaries. Governments are looking to streamline their costs, so this is a great opportunity for you to come in and help eliminate some of that overtime expense, and that data is readily available. It's public. Number 14, online marketing. Most staffing firms don't take the internet seriously enough. The ones that did, they did a survey and found that company websites, email blasts, social media, and search engine optimization had the most return on their marketing investment. So if you're not up to snuff in these areas, you need to be, because your competitors are. Number 16, we touched on it briefly earlier, which is independent contractors. There was a stat that 87% of companies out there are misclassifying independent contractors, and the odds of being audited are 40%. So that's a big risk for companies out there. Staffing firms have the opportunity to offer auditing service and compliance service to make sure that companies are safe. And the last one I'm going to point out, number 19, marketing in general. The staffing firm in general does not take marketing seriously enough. The packaged goods and retail industries, they spend up to 10% on marketing. Staffing firms spend 0.4% of sales on marketing. So there's a big, big gap there. Matt, if you wouldn't mind taking us through what makes a successful staffing sales force.
Yep, and I've got a lot on this one. We're going to go through it really quick. If anybody wants to discuss it after, I'd be happy to, because there's a lot of good stuff from this session. Staffing industry analysts did a Salesforce practices effectiveness survey, and they came up with a lot of good information. Real quickly, high-growth staffing companies rely on cold calling more. This might sound, this is actually kind of surprising to me until I thought about it. But the companies that we saw do the best in the 2009 recession were companies that continued to sell and market aggressively. I'm just going to go over the conclusions that they came up with here real quick. High-growth staffing companies were the best at acquiring the best talent, compensating effectively based on performance. That's a big one. Sales reps need to be compensated effectively. Your highest performers, should be getting the most money. Using cold calling as a sales tool and leveraging their CRM effectively. And high-growth companies are also less likely to hire from within the staffing industry. They got a lot of their sales reps from outside of the industry, and they were more likely to use behavioral-based interviews to identify high-potential candidates. And the last thing I'll say from this session was that they talked about how narrowness of focus promotes sales effectiveness. New account acquisition is very different from mining existing account relationships. So if you give your sales reps, these narrow things to focus on, they can be more effective. I think Steve's got the next slide on hidden sales opportunities.
Yeah, piggybacking on some of what Matt said in regards to sales, this is really a basic concept that it seems isn't implemented often enough in the sales process, and it all boils down to pinpointing your customers' pain points and customizing solutions that work for them, really what they're looking for. So it's all about identifying their pain, and asking key questions, asking why. For example, if a client tells us they need a new website, we ask them why. We want to know what's their pain point. Oftentimes we'll glean information from them, such as they have trouble attracting top candidates. And then we know how to customize their website, and we can develop a solution that works for them. And then it's a matter of identifying the impact that this pain point is going to have on their business, and then lastly developing a solution, again, integrating these hot button issues into the solutions. And again, it's a simple task, but it's often overlooked, and these simple things can really help you get to the key decision makers and being consistent and maintaining top-of-mind awareness in your prospects. And I think Matt has some more to talk about how to help your business stand out.
Yeah, so real quick, to stand out, you need to take ownership and commit to service, do whatever it takes to make the client happy. You also need to empower your employees to make decisions. Make it less like the car buying experience. Just make it so that the most important person to the client is the person that they are talking to and dealing with. So empower that person. Just remember that communication is really important. Try to have one point of contact, no matter how large or small the organization is. And if the client has a vendor-neutral program, suggest supplier update calls so you can have good communication with that client. I think we're going to move on to lessons learned here.
All right, yeah, and as Matt mentioned a couple times, we've had to shorten this because we're running out of time. But if anybody does want to talk to us about any of the specific sessions, please let us know. We'll be happy to continue the conversation in a little more detail after today's webinar. But we do want to run down some of the most important lessons that we're taking home from the executive forum. So I'll start off. Lesson number one, it's time to think more broadly about staffing. The big guys are doing more than temp help and direct hire. How can you help your clients better manage their workforce challenges?
Great, David. Lesson 2 that we gleaned was look beyond traditional uses of staffing. So don't wait for orders to come in. Look at that list of 20 underserved markets and think about how you can capitalize. Look at sites like Odesk. Think about their approach and think about what they're doing that you're not. Look at small businesses. As Matt, I believe, mentioned earlier, small businesses can offer a huge reward and much larger markups. And small businesses are the ones that are fueling the recovery right now, and they need staff. And the last one, and possibly most important on this list, become a local expert. The big guys there, the international staffing firms, said that they can't compete in local expertise. That's where smaller and medium-sized firms really have an advantage, so capitalize on that.
Yeah, and real quickly on healthcare, there's lots of uncertainty ahead, and nobody knows what's happening. It's still being debated in Congress, but you can't sit back. You're really going to need to be proactive. So use 2012 to start defining your plans, and then hopefully so you can implement in 2013. Another thing to remember is this is where you can be a resource to your clients too, because they can't really stay on top of this stuff, and they're going to need your expertise as they're planning on the healthcare changes.
Lesson 4, catch the wave. Catch that secular wave in terms of how companies view and use staffing services. Help them to use staffing more strategically. Lead the charge by educating your clients so they see more ways to use staffing in their business to help solve their problems of getting work out the door, reducing costs, and improving productivity.
Okay, great. Lesson 5, don't be too cool for school. There's a big talent gap, and it's been growing for the last 20 years. And recently there's been up to a 40% high school dropout rate in urban areas. So staffing firms have a real opportunity to partner with local schools and help build that pipeline. There was a great example in Asia Pacific. Many staffing companies are actually running their own schools to ensure a talent pipeline. So think about this in your local market. See where the skill shortage is, and see if you can partner with a local institution to help develop your talent pipeline.
Lesson number 6, retention is your best customer service tool. Focus on it. Internal turnover is still exceeding 35% annually. How can you make your firm a best place to work for your internal staff? This goes back to engaging your employees. What can you do to wow your employees and your clients? It's the little things that make the difference every day. And more importantly, how are you measuring this? How are you keeping your employees engaged through surveys, conversations, reviews, et cetera, to keep that dialogue going and finding out what is it that makes them tick and how can you make your place a better place to work?
And lesson 7, good staffing is about filling job orders. Great staffing is about education. Don't assume your clients really understand the value of your services. If they're asking you commodity questions, they don't. Teach people when, why, and how to best use staffing. And you'll not only differentiate your firm, but you'll actually expand the market for staffing by showing people new ways to use your services.
Lesson number 8, social media is not a trend. As we said before, it came up in almost every discussion we were in. It's very much a part of the staffing and recruiting landscape. You need to view it as an opportunity. Too often it's viewed as a burden and something you have to do. It's a tremendous opportunity for your business, and you need to find a way to make it part of what you do every day.
Okay, and building off that, social isn't just affecting social media, it's affecting search, it's affecting how people use the internet. So if you want to be ignored, a good way to do it is to ignore social media. Google's recent changes are leaning more on social cues to determine what people want to see, so it's really dictating search results. In our next lunch with Haley, we're going to dig deeper into this topic, and I think it makes a lot of sense for staffing firms to pay attention, because it's going to affect how candidates find you and how clients find you. So I encourage you to sign up for the next lunch with Haley too.
And finally, it's time to get a mobile strategy. You've got an opportunity right now. Most of the staffing industry doesn't have a mobile strategy. By developing one now, you can be ahead of the industry and become ready for job seekers where it's becoming their preferred platform. And the big question asked is your website ready? Do you already have a mobile version? If not, time to plan for one. All right, well, thank you very much for attending today's Lunch with Haley webinar. I hope that everybody took home some good points from the 2012 Staffing Industry Executive Forum. I do want to say, if you have not attended the Executive Forum in the past, it is a fantastic event. I believe next year's event is going to be in Orlando, Florida, so we hope we'll see you there. And at a minimum, we hope we're going to see you in another few weeks for our next Lunch with Haley event, as Brad just mentioned, where we talk about social relevance and how social media is changing the way clients and candidates choose a staffing provider. So once again, from all of us, thank you very much for attending today's Lunch with Haley webinar. And if we can help you answer any questions about the Executive Forum or your marketing, please just give us a shout.